Immigration Executive Order Update. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hey everyone, this is Mac Pierre-Louis, attorney, mediator, arbitrator, and I'm back to discuss immigration law on the LMI podcast with Andy Semotiuk. Andy, how are you doing today?
Fantastic. Glad to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, good to have you back, and as always, to talk more about immigration. And so, for folks who don't know you, of course, you are an attorney who's based in Canada, but who's worked throughout Canada and the US for many years. I will screen share your website, which is PaceLawFirm, and folks out there who might be listening to this can check out the YouTube video version of it if you're on Spotify or Amazon Music, because the podcast is growing, and so we want people to be able to see for themselves. Anyway, folks want to connect with you, they can check out PaceLawFirm.com to learn more. But Andy, you've kind of become a regular now, on the show, and so we appreciate you so much. And so every time we have questions involving immigration, deportation, asylum, you're the go-to guy. And
Well,
so,
you've got a good program, Mac, and we've had some good discussions that I think can be valuable to people who have immigration questions.
yes, sir. Well, certainly this one, we'll get right into it. We're talking now about these executive orders that have just been coming down the pipe over the last number of days since January 20th, since Inauguration Day. So, of course, as everyone around the world knows, we have a new president, the return of Donald Trump, and he has taken immigration enforcement very seriously, and he is signing off immigration executive orders left and right. And so you're here to kind of share a little bit about what you know is going on, and
Right.
to give some tips to people who are a little scared and concerned about what's happening right now. And I will let you lead it, but I will also share my screen again to just showcase a little bit about the executive order that is on the White House's website right now. And that's executive order signed on January 20th, 2025, called Protecting the American People Against Invasion.
Right.
And now that's how the president described it. But could you go ahead, Andy, and just give us a little bit of a background on what's been happening in terms of these executive orders?
Sure. Well, let's start with one, the most sort of controversial one, and that's Trump has attacked this business of birthright to
Hmm.
citizenship, which is protected by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. And the basic gist there is that someone who's born in the United States is automatically a U.S. citizen, according to constitutional law. But President Trump passed or signed an executive order requiring more than just being born in the United States, requiring that the parents be permanent residents or citizens in order to pass down citizenship. That's been struck down by the courts already, like right out of the gate. There's an injunction against further processing of that particular executive order. And I believe most lawyers would agree that the problem is you have to make a constitutional amendment in order to cancel birthright citizenship, albeit that there's some concern about people using birthright as a means of getting citizenship by essentially bringing in women who are expecting into the country just before birth and helping them. And actually, in some cases, there are people making a living doing this, bringing them into the country putting them into hotels, arranging hospital stays, and arranging for the birth of their children just for the purpose of them being able to gain the citizenship and then going back to their country of origin. So
Yes.
that, it's a source of concern,
Yeah.
but so far that's gone nowhere. And probably, in order to do something along that line, he's going to have President Trump is going to have to get the cooperation of Congress. Now he has a majority in both houses, but I think for a constitutional amendment you need 2/3 majority,
Correct.
which I don't think he will have. And also the cooperation of states. A certain number of states have to endorse the amendment as well. And it's
Yeah.
just at the moment it doesn't seem realistic. So
Yeah.
that's where that one.
Yes. So on that one, the Supreme Court's probably going to have a say in this ultimately, right? Isn't Trump's tactic to just drive this particular question to the Supreme Court ultimately, because this question of right of the soil or whether or not people should have birthright citizenship has come up before, and the Supreme Court has always said, yes, if you're born in the U.S., it the whole subject to the jurisdiction thereof, clause of the
Right.
amendment that gives this blanket ability to just claim birthright citizenship. I think Trump's tactic, in my opinion, is to try to get it to the Supreme Court, who he
Agreed.
thinks might, strike and reverse themselves and allow for exceptions to be made. But we'll see where that goes. But you're correct. Currently, that's not going anywhere.
And I know that Trump has his nominees on the bench, but I can't imagine even his nominees and the others on the
Yeah.
bench in the Supreme Court
Yeah.
running counter to the Constitution and somehow coming up with some other angle to this thing. I just don't
Yep.
see it. And thankfully, the legal community in general has supported this view that I'm expressing.
Yeah.
And of course, the courts have stepped in so far
Correct.
and have also supported. So that's where we are on that one. And that's
Got
the
it.
key one. That's the number one
Yeah, it's a big one.
order right out of the gate that has gotten stuck.
Okay.
And now we're talking about the thing that you pulled up on the
Yeah.
screen. These other, the other provisions. In that area, I guess we're concerned about the enforcement that is taking place now in the United States. People getting arrested and jailed, and there's discussions about sending 30,000 undocumented aliens
Mhm.
to Guantanamo Bay, where they would be held
Yeah, I heard
for
that.
the time being. So, pertaining to this area, um, this is a really critical. You have to be very sort of surgical in this area to understand what's going on. And so, if I may just take a moment, I'd like to discuss how
Sure.
Trump is handling it and how clever it is the way he's doing it, but what's wrong with it. So the idea is we got to, like, broad statement from Trump's office is we got to collect everybody who's a criminal and arrest them and deport them. And the key word there is criminal. So if you look at who's in the United States, who is a criminal and who's not, this is where all the content matters. A criminal may be someone who's been found guilty of a felony, but there may be criminal convictions of a misdemeanor nature. Well, okay, you can say, well, they've been found criminally responsible even for misdemeanor. Then there are people who have been given, for example, deportation orders, and they may be criminal in nature. But the of the 11 million people, plus or minus, that we're talking about, only about a million, maybe a million and a half, fall into this category, in my view, of what is criminal. And to understand it, there's a concept called EWI, entry without inspection.
Mhm.
So if someone crawls across the Rio Grande River and comes into the United States secretly at night and stays in the United States, that's an iwi, entry without inspection, way of coming to the United States, and that is a criminal entry. Also, if you've been deported from the United States and you come back again, that's a criminal entry into the United States. In those instances, because they are criminal immigration infractions, these people do deserve, if you're talking about criminals, to be deported, rounded up and deported. But, for example, someone who enters with inspection, which is what normally most people do, such as you fly into the United States as a visitor
Mhm.
and then stay longer than your period of authorized stay,
Yeah.
such a person who's undocumented, while having not complied with the administrative requirement of the Immigration Act, is not a criminal. That's not a criminal provision. It's just non-compliance with the immigration provisions
Mhm.
of the Immigration and Nationality Act of the United States. Those are the people who, besides the 1.5 million who are, shall we say, criminals, are not criminals but are being called criminals. So in press conferences that the young lady who is now the spokesman for or
Yes.
spokesperson for President Trump,
Yeah. Levitt,
in
I believe.
her
Mhm.
references, she has said we have to deport all the criminals, and she's using that term to mean all 11 million people who are not criminals, 10 or so million who are not criminals but are being called criminals. And to give you a sense of how preposterous or outrageous that is, it's really the president and the current administration using their power to outlaw someone, such as, for example, if you or I are speeding down the highway and get caught by an officer for driving in excess of the lawful rate of speed, for someone of that nature to be arrested and driven out of the country for that uh, indiscretion or that violation of a law, although it's not a criminal law. Or, for example, a parking ticket might be even a lesser sort of such violation that could give rise or can be argued to be enough of a reason to deport someone from the United States. In other words, it's not rule of the law or uh, rule of law as we lawyers like to think of how this system works, but rule by law, meaning someone who's in power decides, okay, we don't like you because of what you have done, and we're, despite the fact you're not a criminal, we're going to call you a criminal and we're going to deport you because of that. That's what's going on in terms of my view, in terms of how things are being handled in the White House these days. Now, luckily for us as lawyers, you and I and others, or attorneys, we have a court system that we can turn to block such what I would regard as deportations without due process. And, that would be in violation of the constitutional law of our lands,
Mhm.
Fifth Amendment and so on. So, um, but it's alarming, and it's alarming in the sense that people, relatively innocent people, or people who have spent a lifetime, 10 years or more anyway, trying to make good of themselves in America, are being subjected to very extreme measures, uh, and fear is the result on the streets. People are uncertain of what's going to happen to them. Families pulled apart.
Yeah. No, I've definitely have felt that because I've gotten questions from folks who are very concerned that they might be next. However, so far, I think it's pretty clear that the focus has been on people who already have removal orders, right? Some judge has already ruled that, hey, you got to leave the country, but it wasn't being done. And so now the administration's coming in to get the people out. So most of the people who are being escorted out are probably quote unquote criminals in the sense that we think of felonies, right?
Yeah,
They committed felonies, not misdemeanors, and they're usually violent. And I think there was pretty clear consensus on this. When you and I
oh,
last
of
talked
course.
about this,
Yeah,
this was something we talked about. And then I remember when you were giving your outlook about what you would advise the president to do, I think your position was that there has to be a cutoff date. If you have come, within the last 5 or 10 years or whatever, people
right,
should be allowed to, adjust their status, pay a
right,
fine, you know, basically get at the end of the line, but have the issue addressed.
right.
But this blanket, just everyone's a criminal and kick them out, I think it's going to be an overshot, I think, in many ways.
Let me just, for the lawyers who are listening, or for people who are really like, they love to get the exact specifics,
Yep.
I'll just mention the provisions that are governing these matters are 8 USC sections 1325 and 1326. They can look them up if they want to, in terms
Right.
of who is a criminal and who isn't. Um,
Okay. I'll
but
put
there's
that in
one
the
other
notes.
element to this discussion that maybe we should touch on, and that
Sure.
is uh, President Trump has announced that he's going to send some of these people who have been rounded up, not rounded out, but up.
Yeah.
I got to get that right. Uh, to Guantanamo Bay, where the United States has a prison
Yeah, the base.
facility,
Mhm.
largely for terrorists. We've been
Yeah.
keeping terrorists there. So the question is, like, how does that work? And my take on that would be, the problem is due process, and is it right that a someone in America with the protections of the Constitution in America, to the degree that the Constitution applies to people who are visitors or undocumented, aliens, they may not have the full rights that someone who is a citizen has, but nonetheless, there are some constitutional provisions that do apply due process and things of that nature. Can these people be picked up, put on an airplane, and flown to Guantanamo Bay? Is that fair? Like, does that work? And my view is that that's an inappropriate use of executive power, that there's no due process there and there's no constitutional law there. You can't just pick someone up and take them to a foreign state somewhere and put them in a jail and call that American normal due processing of cases in the courts. Um, that's an extraordinary measure. Um, and, there are concerns that people, first of all, there are, from the point of view of people who are there before these people show up, uh, people that we regard as terrorists, or at least the legal system has found them to be uh, terrorists, now probably by military law, maybe not by
Hmm.
civil law, but nonetheless, they are dangerous dudes there. And we're going to be mixing these people in with these dangerous dudes. And the other thing that is a great source of concern is, I believe the facility is there to accommodate something like 3 or 4 thousand people, but President Trump appears to think that you can get like 30,000 people in there. And there are articles circulating expressing concerns about the safety of these individuals and the capacity for, or vulnerability of these individuals to predatory practices and so on while they're incarcerated there.
Hmm.
If they're going to be sent there and the courts comply with this idea of, let's collect these people and send them to, Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah. So I did hear about that news as well. Although you could argue that that's probably one of the most secure prisons in the world, and if bad things are going to be happening to potential inmates, I don't know how it compares to any other prison in America, any other federal, prison. But certainly, due process is a concern for every human, person who's in the U.S. And I don't know what the courts are going to say about that. But let's turn to tips. If you could give just some ideas for people who do have questions out there. I know we don't have the time and the
Yeah.
ability to answer every conceivable question, but folks who are out there who might be scared and who are concerned that they don't have papers and they're worried if their loved one is going to be picked up and rounded up because of an ICE raid,
Right.
at a job site or whatever. What are some things you might share as an attorney?
That's a tough question. I would say this. There are organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, the ALA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, particularly the American Lawyers Association, because we're attorneys,
Yep.
that have on their websites uh, what I would call brochures or pamphlets that lay out what steps you can take to protect yourself or guard as best as you can against ICE raids and so on. Uh, I would encourage people to first go to those kind of sites, any human rights kind of bodies. Uh, so the first step is homework. You're at home, you got a computer. If you
Yep.
don't, a cell phone. Homework. Start researching what are my rights as an immigrant, undocumented immigrant in the United States. I think that's a better piece of advice than my trying to
Sure.
outline a few, like, well, you have, due process rights and so on. Uh, there are legal aid clinics that lawyers, attorneys are holding where you can go and get some advice and also establish a connection to an attorney, which I would recommend because they may come where you may need an attorney to intervene on your behalf. So, also, churches are providing excellent advice and help as another place to look. The Latino community is well organized and seems to be doing well in terms of providing advice for people. Again, so homework is number one. Number two, uh, travel is out. I don't recommend making a target of yourself, shall we say. So I noticed, for example, there are articles where some guy's driving and he gets stopped because of I think he was speeding or something like that, and they find out he's undocumented, and lo and behold. So you can be cautious in that way. Follow the law the way the way it's written. So don't speed. I would say don't take needless risks, such as going on broadcasts and telling people, well, I'm a undocumented immigrant and I want to express my condemnation about what's going on. Now, it's sort of self censorship that I'm kind of advocating in a sense, and I don't like that.
Mm.
But unfortunately, at the moment, calling yourself out as a target or, becoming a target is maybe not the wisest thing to do. Um, so uh, those would be sort of fundamental things that I would offer in terms of advice. Uh, also, look, maybe it's time to call a lawyer and say, hey, I've got this problem. I'm an undocumented immigrant, and I need some advice. And a close friend of mine who was a lawyer, he's passed on, uh, did something that I thought was extraordinarily smart in our profession. And that was when he didn't know some topic, he would call a lawyer and book an appointment for an hour or two and pay that lawyer, that attorney, to get the advice he needed in order to be able to deal with the legal problems that he didn't know how to deal with from the top people that he
Hmm.
could find in the area he was looking for. And I think that, paying a few $100s to an attorney, a U.S. immigration attorney, to get some firsthand advice about your case specifically,
Yeah.
I think would be excellent advice and a really good investment at this time.
Yeah.
Also, and forgive me for kind of preaching or whatever, but listen, this is a time where you don't stick your head in the sand and just hope that things will go by and you'll be all right. I believe information is power. And at this time, if you're an undocumented immigrant in the United States, I believe you got to pay attention to the news on a daily basis to know what's happening where and what they're doing so that you can avoid, uh, uh, like they're talking about, for example, rallying people under churches or, at schools, rounding up people in those kind of settings. So the only way to really be armed to the degree you can be is to follow the news and know what's going on. Be an informed person. Now, if you are actually caught, you should ask for to contact a lawyer, and hopefully you would have the name of a lawyer, a phone number, and so on, to be
Yeah.
able to call a lawyer immediately to step in and help you to get an attorney. These are some of the basics that I would offer at this moment.
Yeah, and I would add also that there's a lot of scammers out there, folks who would want to take advantage of you and, charge you money when they can't actually do anything.
Right.
And so you're seeing some things on Instagram or TikTok, people just making stuff up, right? Um, and I think whenever you have a lot of fear and in a environment where there's fear right now, bad advice kind of just spirals, out of control, and it blows up like wildfire. And then, of course, social media being what it is, it starts sharing and resharing, and you end up hearing, people being told things that don't make any sense. Um,
That's excellent advice. Also, like guard against, be what's the word? Scrupulous about whose advice you're listening to.
yeah,
They should be an immigration attorney, or well, not or an immigration attorney. Uh, Now, because people, for some reason, everybody seems to think they're an expert on immigration law. Even if they've gone through something, so they now like to share their
exactly.
expertise with
Well,
everybody.
this is human nature, right? Like during COVID, everyone had a PhD on COVID all of a
Yeah,
sudden, and now apparently everyone is a FAA
yeah,
expert because of the recent, plane crash.
yeah.
So this is how it is on social media. But now everybody thinks they have every single knowledge, possible when it comes to immigration law. I know.
Beware of notarios that are advertising,
Yeah.
saying they can give advice. Check who this person is. Like if you're going to be sick, and you got a serious illness, this is a serious place. This is not a pretend or minor problem. At this moment, this is a serious issue for people who are undocumented or people who have immigration issues. And because of that, you have to be very careful to get advice from people who are qualified to give such advice. A mark of someone who's particularly qualified is if they are a member of the American Immigration Lawyers
Yep.
Association. And I don't know, I think there's 5,000
Yeah,
members
there's,
or
there's a
more.
ton of attorneys, and most of them actually would put on their website the emblem, the
Yeah,
AILA tag. I was a member of AILA years ago.
yeah.
I did some immigration law at one point, and I've helped multiple people get their green cards and fill out citizenship applications after they were denied before. So I was happy with that work, and I remember being part of ALA and being a member. And so definitely, if an attorney has on the website the ALA, I think it's a Statue of Liberty, symbol,
Yes.
then that's one, identification that might help you, assess that they're
Yeah.
probably worth it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So these are challenging times, certainly, but also times, we got to really think about what are we going to do as a country when it comes to this immigration question. This immigration question has been with us since the founding of this nation, right? It's a country of immigrants, and people can have their opinions, but that's a fact. And groups have come, and there's been different waves. We've wrestled with this, for over the hundreds of years, and now I think that the pendulum's swinging back. But I also believe that if the president overreaches, there's going to be another correction, right? These corrections happen, and so I would think to myself that he would be hopefully smart enough to realize that there's a lot of people who are going to be impacted by these, by this, and so if he doesn't focus on violent criminals but starts spreading this dragnet a little, too wide to where it's now going to be impacting your abuela, then I think the voters are going to eventually speak, and there's going to be a correction, in a couple of years, and so we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see about that. Go ahead,
I'd like to add one more thing before we
please.
conclude. There are people in the United States that have been paroled into the United States: Venezuelans,
Yep, Haitians. Yep,
Ukrainians, Asians.
yep,
Uh, there's some effort being made by President Trump to cancel the parole status of these people, the temporary protective status also.
yep. TPS.
Uh,
Yeah,
but before that can be done, there's a procedure that needs to be followed. It's a due process procedure. You have to give 30 days notice. You give people a chance to comment on what's being proposed. That process has not been followed in the proclamations that have been made. And again, the president has run into difficulty through the courts over enforcing these measures of canceling these parole. And parole is just simply allowing someone to enter the country, the United States, because of troubles
correct.
abroad, such as in Venezuela, for example. Haiti's and
Yeah,
Haiti's
it's a big deal. Even the transitional authorities in Haiti, have been expressing either that if Haitian, immigrants are forced to return back to Haiti in the condition that it's in right now, with gangs trying to control the country, is going to be disastrous, not just for the people coming in, but for the many, many people who are already there, and the country just can't take influx of
right.
people who, to be forced back in. So that's concerning. But hopefully, the president will reconsider that policy.
There's a reason why the courts will step in. One is the failure to follow due process,
Hmm.
but another is there's a concern about bias involved in who is being targeted in this area.
Yeah.
And there's good reason to think that the courts are going to back that off. So that's another area we should have. And
Okay.
I'm glad that we touched on that.
We'll definitely have you back, as these things develop. And I think everyone's going to be, tuning in to your conversations over this. So thank you so much for your knowledge and your expertise in sharing it. I appreciate you. All right. So that's it for now. And if you enjoyed this episode, come back for more on the LMI podcast. All right, everyone. And now let me play my outro music. And until next time.